Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the last webinar of this year for Rising Tide Leadership Development. If you've been with me before, I hope that they've been very useful, that you've had at least one takeaway from each one. And if this is your first time listening in, hopefully this is going to give you some tools to be able to kind of declutter your life and mental approach to things as we talk about being mindful in the midst of chaos. So we're going to go ahead and jump in here today. If you're live, thanks for joining me. If you're listening to the recording, hopefully that you still get something, and I'd love to hear from anybody if you have any questions or concerns or comments. So let's go ahead and jump right into being mindful in the midst of chaos. So we all have stresses that we deal with daily, and these stresses could be from work, they could be at home. These stresses might be from relationships, and there's multiple types of relationships in our lives. And of course, their stresses might be the things that are in our own head. So today we're going to consider some new and maybe different ways to deal with those stresses to help our mental health. And we're going to utilize two things that we're going to talk about. So that's going to be mindfulness and self-care. A lot of people have probably heard these terms before, mindfulness and self-care, but let's get a quick definition of what each one of those things are. So mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something, while self-care is the regulatory function which is under individual control and it is deliberate and self-initiated. So obviously it's about taking care of ourselves. And as we talk through today, that self-care is not going to be only on the physical side, but on the mental side more than anything else. So here we go. When it comes to being aware and taking care of our mental health, the mindfulness and the self-care really work together for this. That's why we're talking about both of them throughout this webinar this morning. What's difficult is a lot of times we feel like the situations that we're in are just what they are, right? We just accept them as is, and we don't look at ways that we can dictate or plan out or set boundaries for those situations or the people in our lives. If we are aware of them and we start to be more mindful in situations of what takes from me, what drains my emotional bucket, or what fills up my emotional bucket, then we can start to take action on directing our thinking within those situations and or avoiding said situations. So we're going to talk about all of those things. Sadly, historically, we as a society have been taught that our mental health hasn't been as important as our physical health. There's been a lot of emphasis on physical health, but the mental health side hasn't had the attention it's needed. Now, there's been more focus given to this in the last few years, but it's something that a lot of us are still trying to figure out how to do better. So, as a result, because of how we grew up or the examples we've seen in past jobs and or mentors or things like that or people like that, we've learned to do a few things, such as sweep issues under the rug, right? Or for some people who are very big people pleasers, which a lot of us have become more of, we just avoid situations altogether. We don't even sweep it under the rug, we just avoid it. Also, we've learned to grin and bear it through toxic relationships. We think that it's more important to be committed to that person than it is to our own mental or physical health. So we've learned to just get through these things. And finally, we've learned to overload our schedules because we're afraid to say no, either to situations or to people. And so these are just three examples of things that we've learned to do because we haven't placed such enough emphasis on our mental health to help us in our decision making. Do any of these three sound familiar to you? Were they examples that you were given or things that you learned growing up that you maybe now do or have done in the past? I'll be honest, you know, these are things that I've seen in my life, whether, in family or in bosses that I've had or mentors that, there were always something that wasn't necessarily positive for me mentally or me physically, but they were things that I've learned. So the good news is we can learn to change our approach to stressors and the chaos. So let's talk about how we can do some of those things. So when we're talking about our approach, right? Remember that negativity and unhappiness can be introduced into our lives through different relationships that we have, whether that's family members, it could be friendships, it could be partners, it could be coworkers. Um, it can be a challenge to work or know how to respond to certain people when they come to us with certain things. But what we need to understand is that behaviors and attitudes from other people that are coming towards us, they aren't necessarily our fault. The way others cope with their feelings is part of their mental health, and that can be reflected or projected onto us, but it's not a reflection of who you are as a person. So, for example, think of how two people might respond if they dropped and broke a glass. One person might get upset about it, and one person might just calmly clean it up and move forward with it. There's two different approaches, and it has to do with where they're at in their mental state and their mental health more so than it is anybody who's around them. Okay, and so whether that's a broken glass or any kind of situation that we're in family or at work or with friends, there's they have to take responsibility for their actions, and we don't have to necessarily take on those responsibilities just for ourselves. This is one of my favorite pictures, and it really helps um, show the best way to think about this. I call this the circle of control. So as you can see, anything inside the circle says in my control. That means I have direct control over all of these things. Anything outside the circle is um, things that I don't have direct control over. So if you look, right, the future, the media, other people's opinion of me, other people's behavior and beliefs, the past, all these things are outside of my control. Now, I might face these things, but I don't have direct control over them. So as we're talking about being mindful, we also need to be aware of what can we control in any given situation. And as you see inside, we have self-talk, my energy, my words, my self-care, things like my boundaries or my response to these things outside my control. So depending on where I put my energy, if I put my energy on things outside the circle, I can become more stressed. If I put my energy on things inside the circle, I can help cope with or deal with the stress in a much healthier way, especially from a mental health aspect. So we're going to return to this, but the rest of what we talk about is going to really play back on this: what's inside my control, my circle of control, and what's outside my circle of control. And as we're talking about what's in our control and what's outside our control, we can start to look at setting those boundaries. One of the most important aspects of being mindful in the middle of chaos is taking measures to eliminate as much as possible. So this might mean um, staying away from negative people. It might mean looking at our schedule and looking at what things fill my bucket emotionally that I enjoy doing, or which people do I love and enjoy being around that fill me up and encourage me, and which people do I know are going to take a little more energy to be around and maybe might drain me a little bit, right? As we can, if we can start to look at our schedule in such a way with that as one of the considerations, it really does make a difference on how much energy we have at the end of the week versus at the beginning of the week. Um, it's true we can't control every interaction that we have, um, but those that we have regular interactions with, specifically family and friends that are outside of the workspace, we can dictate those interactions, who we're going to spend time with, how much time we're going to spend with them, or you know what what are we saying yes to versus what are we saying no to. Um, it doesn't matter whether it's a gossipy coworker or someone who just is a time waster, or maybe it's an overly critical family member, or even in relationships, it might be someone who's just toxic for you, right? If we can start to eliminate these interactions, um, then we can make room for people who will encourage us and pour into us. So uh, we have to look at who are we spending time with and what are those interactions for? Are they helping us or are they hurting us? Just like in any relationship, sometimes we do need to go different ways from our friends. A friend of mine in college told me, and I haven't spoken to him in years, but I've always remembered this. He said, some people are constants in life, even though they aren't constantly in our life. And I've always remembered that because there are some people that once you connect with them, maybe it's been years since you've talked to them, but every time you have a conversation with them, it's like things pick up right where they left off and they're encouraging and it's a good interaction and you both walk away fulfilled. Um, and then some people might just be in our lives for a season, right? That season might be through college, or season might be through a summer internship, or whatever it is. People come and go in our lives, and that's okay, right? As long as we're growing and uplifting each other, those relationships are beneficial. Um, Now, as we're talking about maybe going a different route from certain friends, or not spending as much time with certain friends because they are a little more toxic or they are a little more draining. I'm not saying that we need to break up with friends simply over minor disagreements or minor arguments, but looking at the patterns of, is this person someone who lifts me up and fills me, or is this someone who does take more of my energy, and when I'm done being with them, I'm a little bit more emotionally drained. um, when it comes to friends in particular, when we're talking about being uplifting and being mindful and mental health aspect, because we choose friends, they should be two-way streets. They should be ones that encourage each other and build each other up. It shouldn't be a one-way street where one person is more of a taker and one is more of a giver, and the giver always ends up drained when they're going their separate ways as far as after they've been together. So it's just a matter of um, planning out when and who you spend your time with. If it's not someone who does fulfill you or nourish you in your friendship, and you look at regularly, you feel drained when you're done with them, or they always have something negative to say, or that maybe it's that person that just always has something going on, quote unquote. Like we all have life happening, but they just constantly are in the middle of something big in their life. Sometimes it's hard because there's the idea of being there for somebody, but then there's the idea of like, what's it doing to me and my mental health? If you feel exhausted just by the idea of hanging out with someone, maybe that's a sign that you should move on because it's not a nourishing relationship. Not to say that all of them have to be, but they don't all have to be draining either. Another thing is, so we talked about friendships, so now let's talk about family members, right? So when we make that decision because we see the pattern, and usually it's over months or years that we see that, you know what, maybe this isn't the best thing for me or for us to be friends anymore. Friends are hard to part ways with, but family members are even harder. One of the best things that you can do, though, is to set limits on the amount of time you wish to spend interacting with toxic people. Remember, family or not, toxic people are toxic people. And I don't say that harshly, it's just the truth. So make sure you keep conversations positive, pleasant, and focused on the other person. Like focusing on them, what you're doing is you're avoiding any type of trauma while being able to maintain the relationship if that's what you're looking for. But just like friendship, sometimes we do have to cut ties with family because it's bringing us down and we need to be able to take care of our health, especially if you have family, if you have children, you need to be able to pour into them as well. With that idea, whether friends or family, remember we're all on different paths. Um, and with that being said, we have a different relationship with every person we've ever had an interaction with. So whether that's sharing a smile with somebody, that's a short hello with somebody, we have some type of relationship with the people that we encounter. right? Now, these relationships can last a moment where we exchange hellos or smiles. They can be as long as, a lifetime where you've got that friend that you've been friends with since you were both in diapers, or anything in between. So, whatever it is, as far as the relationship goes, remember, we're all on our own paths. And each relationship that we have, we cross paths and we learn from one another. Um, but we might not walk side by side for a long time, and that's okay. It might be a lifetime, it might be a day, it might be a season, but we're all walking our own paths. And so it's okay if someone comes into your life and then goes out of your life, because we might have learned some great things from them that we can continue to apply. And they might have learned great things from you that you can continue to apply, or they can continue to apply. And we continue to walk the paths that we're supposed to walk. Um, and no matter who it is, no matter whether it's just that simple exchange of a smile or hello, or someone that you've been um, walking beside for 20 plus years, understand that no matter what or who or how long, ultimately you do play a role in determining how long you walk along that certain path of that certain person. So it might be a two-way street, but you still have a decision to make in that. Do I continue with this person because we have fun and we lift each other up and encourage each other, or do I consider, this person does drain me a lot, and I don't really get a lot of encouragement or uplifting from the situation? That's something you have to consider when we're talking about finding this mindfulness and taking care of ourselves in the midst of all that's going on, especially this time of the year where there's lots of family time, lots of friend time, just lots of interactions with the holidays and things like that. This is very pertinent at this time. Here's the hard part for a lot of us: learning to say no. In order to cut down on chaos in your life, you've got to make it a priority to keep your plate filled with the things that are important to you. One way I like to look at priorities is your schedule should be filled with the things that are important to you, whether that's for family or for work or your own personal interests. Those things that are higher priorities should go in your calendar first. And then, if there's room, then the wants of other people can start to go into your calendar. But again, a lot of us have started to become more people pleasers in recent years. And so we want to say yes to everything. But remember, when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. So, in the moment when somebody comes to you and asks you to help something, and you might feel guilty a little bit the first time you say no to them, remember, what are you saying yes to? If I'm saying no to something at work outside of my regular responsibilities, maybe I'm just saying yes to more family time, or more time with my spouse, or more time with friends that are very important to me, right? It's a balance, and we just need to remember why we're saying no to certain things, and we need to balance those things out, because no matter what it is, when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else, and when we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else. So keeping your priorities is going to be super helpful, and this will also take some of the stress off, because then we can say, you know what, my schedule is filled with my priorities, not my schedule is filled with the wants and needs of other people all of the time. So that's something, learning to say no is something that a lot of us can benefit from, um, especially for the mental health aspect and for family too. I feel like that's a place where I've seen a lot of people say, well, I just wish I had more time for my family, for my kids. Well, it's because they've said yes to certain things that they probably could have said no to, so they could spend more time with family and the spouse, or family and friends. So we've talked about planning ahead. Now let's talk about, what if we're already in a situation and um, we need to get out of it? How do we exit that particular thing? I know I've been in plenty of awkward or draining interactions where it's just like, oh, it's hard to get through and it just doesn't flow at all. Yet, for all of us, there's a line between being polite and yet saving yourself from the stress of staying too long in a conversation. Maybe it's just uncomfortable, maybe it's just not going anywhere, or maybe it is something that could hinge on being dangerous. Here's a simple rule that you can go by. Spending 5 minutes chatting with someone is polite. 10 minutes is more than enough. And any longer than that, you have every right to excuse yourself because your time is important. And so if this is a conversation that maybe it's being dominated by the other person or it's just something that's uh, not benefiting both of you, it's okay to excuse yourself. And again, um, hopefully these situations are definitely the exception and not the rule and few and far between. But if you feel like you're in danger or the other person is being obscene about something, you can simply say, "Excuse me, I've got to go," and walk away. Now, that might take courage the first time you do it, but the more you practice that and are in those situations, hopefully you're not in those situations more, the more you'll be able to turn to that and you won't have to muster as much courage each time because you identify it because you are being mindful and utilizing self-care and uh, getting yourself out of said situation. So we've talked about getting away or planning who we're going to spend time with or staying away from toxic people and not spending a lot of time with them. So who should we uh, have around ourselves? And hopefully it's people that support you um, and encourage you and lift you up. And so by getting rid of the other type, the toxic types of relationships or situations or meetings, that will allow you more time to spend uh, with those who do encourage you and do lift you up, give you support. If you find yourself thinking right now as you're listening to me talk, well, I don't really have anyone who fits that category. Maybe you can start reaching out to support groups of different interests that you have and just getting around people who support the things that you're interested in. Again, maybe it's an art club or a reading or book club. Maybe it's a group who have the same type of pet that you have or anything like that. All of these things can be used to um, surround yourself with the right type of people. And to be honest, I've benefited from it. Many people in my family have benefited from it. If you have um, the ability to go to mental health professional or counselor, I highly suggest that to you because it can be very beneficial in working through things and getting it out of your own mind. But it's a type of support that you can have for yourself. In talking about that, right, we're focusing more on the inner circle, like we've talked about. So here's the circle of control again. Um, by bringing those people into your life, what you're doing is you're focusing on your type, your energy, right, your self-talk, self-care, and that you have people that are pouring positivity into you instead of negativity, or people that are simply pouring into you and not taking from you all the time. So as we finish out the rest of this webinar, we're going to focus on what's in the circle and how can we bring more of the calmness or the peace to you instead of the things that we've already talked about is and limiting the things outside of our control. Create spaces that bring you calmness. So as we move forward and get away from like the people aspect, um, find a way to um, make your space something that brings calmness to you or that is a benefit where it brings you back into the moment, right? If you ever watched any of those home makeover shows, you know how much a physical space can impact well-being. Whether it's a cluttered bedroom or a toilet office, um, the environment that we create for ourselves makes a big difference in our psychological health. Three things that really I enjoy doing as far as making the space feel better: ditch the clutter. I try hard to not be cluttered, but even right now, my desk is a bit cluttered, so that can affect me and it affects other people. Ditch the clutter in the house. That is super helpful as well. Add more light. Thing is, especially with sunlight, and sunlight in the mornings is very beneficial to our health physically and to our health mentally. The more light that we can get, the more alert that we can be. dim spaces might be calming, but they might not help with mental focus as much. And another one is adopt a plant, whether that's a plant for your window in the house or um, doing a garden. We did a garden this year, like I said, and it's been super helpful in helping me through the summers anyway, or in the time that we had that, to really just uh, let down mentally all the things that I've been working on, all the travel that I had to do, all the clients that I've had, and just be in the moment and take care of something that brings me into the present, which was super helpful throughout the summer, and I look forward to it again next year. So, three little things in your space that can start to bring peace or calmness to your positivity anyway. Some other things that you can add to cultivate positivity is just have things around that make you smile, whether that's the color schemes that you use, or I'm a big quotes person, so I like to have quotes in different places, whether that's in my office or in my truck or shoot, even on my phone. Um, different pictures that make you happy. Maybe it's because of you like nature, or you like cityscapes, or whatever it is, or maybe it's because of who took the picture. My aunt's a photographer, and she's got some amazing pictures that just really are peaceful to look at, because I know she's the one that was behind the camera when that picture was taken. Um, and if this is not something that you've done before, you can always look online at different ideas that can bring you into the moment, or into the present, and things that just make you smile and continue to bring positivity as opposed to the negativity that we're all used to. Um, so these are ways that we can surround ourselves with more positivity or bring calmness to our day. But one of the best ways of generating positivity is to spread compliments. As we share compliments or uplift other people, it's hard not to be in a positive mindset. The interesting thing is when we start to um, talk in the positive, we start to think in the positive, we start to see more of it. And it's not something where we have to feel it. When we choose to look for compliments to people, whether that's just, um, you know, even just a smile to somebody, or complimenting somebody's shirt, or something that a coworker's done, we start to see more of those things. And it's not that they weren't there before; it's that um, we're looking for them intentionally, and it's that intentionality that really makes a big difference. So, if you want to generate more positive energy and more of a positive mindset, start giving compliments to those around you. Not only with the looking for the positive, right? When we're speaking to others, we need to also check to make sure that we're not falling into the negative mindset when we're talking about others. If you catch yourself thinking or talking negatively about somebody else, take a pause and shift your thoughts into something negative about that person. What is it that person maybe brings to the team, or something that they've done for you that helped you out, a thought that they gave you. If for whatever reason you find it hard to get to a positive, maybe shift your mindset to another person or another situation that you can be positive about, and then return um, with that positive outlook in your mind to that person or situation. Um, it's just like the example I like to use is when you buy a new vehicle, right? Maybe it's one that you've never had before. All of a sudden, you see this vehicle all over the place because now that you have one, you look for it, right? It's not that those cars weren't there before. It's just that now that you have one, you see it because you're looking for it. And it's the same thing with being positive or being uplifting. The more positive we are, the more intentional we are about finding the positives, the more we're going to see the positives. Um, it doesn't mean that we are oblivious or ignorant to the negative things or the harsh things or the stressful things that are out there. It's just that we're more open to seeing the good things. So that can be a big, big benefit as well. So also when we're talking about how are we checking ourselves about talking about others, definitely need to check how we talk about ourselves, right? Um, More often than not, we are our own worst critics, and how we speak to ourselves can take a toll on our mental health over many, many years. So we need to stop the negativity and start being more positive. So the next time that you're maybe looking at yourself in the mirror and destructive or negative thoughts start to come in, stop those in their tracks, take control of them, and start to list out a few things that you're grateful for that are going on in your life, whether that's things you're gifted with, things that you've been blessed with, things that you've worked for. Look at the positives, look at the things that you're grateful for, and that starts to switch our mindset a lot. Another thing to do when we're starting to feel overwhelmed, especially in those times where we feel stressed or we feel anxious, or maybe even just when those negative thoughts are starting to pour in because of wherever we're at, well, whatever we're going through. A lot of times it's really helpful just to um, take control of your breathing. Um, it's honestly over 15 years of personal training before I got into coaching. This was my number one cue to my clients was breathe. So when they were trying to learn something new, a new skill set, a new exercise, the first thing that they would do is they would start to hold their breath. And so I would simply say breathe. And the breathing also helped them get back in the rhythm and the motion that they were doing. So if we can take control of our breathing, it also helps bring our mind away from the anxiousness, which is often rooted in things that we think are coming up or in the future, and it brings us back to the moment. So just taking a few moments to close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and slow it down, almost mimicking the sound of like waves, right? So a slow and steady breath in with a pause in between the inhales and exhales can really bring you back to calmness and also back into the moment. So then we can start to evaluate what are our next steps in dealing with these things. And with our breathing, as we start to take control of that, then we can also start to find outlets for our stress or anxiety. We've talked about a few things, but utilizing that energy that we have to find something to get us in the moment. It could be art, it could be crafts. Some people really like cooking or baking, even. It could be, finding time to spend with your pet or with other people with pets. Um, these are things that we can use to really get our mind off of the day to day tasks that are needed and get back into the moment of, you know, I'm getting rid of energy and I'm getting rid of the stress because I can focus on this right here in the moment as opposed to thinking of, oh, well, I have to do this tomorrow and I have to do this next week. And so it's helpful in being mindful because now we're just focusing on this activity or this outlet. Some other things that are super helpful as far as outlets go. Um, we talked about, gardening or having plants. Those are things that we have to tend to as well and continue to work on. And a lot of people like to use different exercises, whether that's going to the gym and lifting weights, going for a run and getting away for a little bit, or some people still enjoy playing a sport for some type of exercise activity. Any of these things that can kind of get us away from the stressors and the responsibilities of the day to day and help us stay in the moment. And maybe it gives us more interactions with others outside of responsibilities. These can be super helpful as well. This one's tough for a lot of people because A, we haven't done it before, and B, it's something we have to get used to. But give yourself time to feel your feelings. Find out what it is that's causing that anxiety or that stress. Identify those things that um, maybe weigh on you a little bit more. Um, and this is the point where if you really are feeling overwhelmed, really try to connect with a mental health professional or counselor. They can make a big, big difference in how we deal with things because there's an objective outsider that kind of helps facilitate our own thoughts and anxiousness, things like that. If that's not a possibility, and maybe you just aren't at that point where you feel like you need to reach out to somebody, try writing your thoughts down. Get those anxieties and those maybe their fears even out onto a piece of paper. And when we read through them again from from an outside perspective, because they're not just in our head, we start to get new perspective, and maybe we see ways that we can deal with them better or avoid them altogether. So some things like that are just getting into the idea of dealing with the feelings, not just brushing them away. Speaking of journaling, another great way is to just write down things that you're grateful for. The more we see the good, the more we are grateful, the more we're going to be positive in what we're looking for, right? Instead of looking for, oh, well, this person did that again, or, oh, I'm stuck on the highway again and the traffic's terrible. We start to see the little positives, and those can make a big difference in how our mind thinks. We start to see more and more of the good, and can deal then better with the bad things or the stressful things. And so as we start to wrap up our time together, I was saving this last one because I feel it's the most important piece of advice. But dedicate time to learning how to love yourself and how to take care of yourself. Sometimes the best way to practice self-love is to learn how to enjoy your own company. And that means getting back to some time alone, doing things that you enjoy doing, that are fun, that make you smile, that maybe can bring others together with you in doing these things, but also taking that time to get away and do things that you enjoy on your own. Maybe sometimes, maybe once a year or a quarterly thing where you get away for a road trip for a day or a weekend, so that you can, find out who you are and get away from all those stressors of day-to-day life. These things can be super helpful. And again, a lot of these things, if you're not used to them, might be uncomfortable the first time. But the more courageous you are in dealing with the negativity and focusing on the positive and focusing on who you spend your time with and being mindful of what situations do cause you anxiety, the more peace you're going to find for yourself and the less stress you're going to have. So the more you're going to have energy. So our mental health does affect our physical health. And so all of these things come together to help you be more mindful, even in the midst of these stressful or chaotic times. Well, that about does it as we finish up today's webinar. Thank you again for just being with me, listening. Hopefully you've taken at least one thing that you can start to do today to be more mindful, to set those boundaries, to be a little more courageous, to see more of the positive, and maybe start journaling, right? Whether that's getting your stressors out or whether that's writing down things you're grateful for. Hopefully one of these things will start to benefit you by simply implementing them. And you can always come back and listen and find more things that you can implement along the way in baby steps. So I always try to be in a positive mindset. I tend to be optimistic, maybe to a fault sometimes, but I do try very hard to find the positive in situations. And I know in today's world and the things that we're facing, it can be somewhat difficult, but the more we do it, the more we will shine a light for people, right? So if you have any questions or concerns or would like more information of what coaching looks like, please feel free to reach out to me. You can either reach out to me through the Facebook page, or you can reach me at Elijah@coachelijah.com. Maybe it's just a matter of, how do I implement this to my own situation, right? How do I make this individualized for me? And we can talk through those things. I'm more than happy to help. So as you go forward, I hope that you have a great rest of your week. And I want you to remember that we become what we think. So the more positive you can think, the more positive things should come your way. I appreciate all the support I've had this year. It's been a great year for me and for the family. And I just hope as we head into 2023 that you have a great year, and hopefully you'll stop in for more of my webinars. I do plan on doing at least one a month as we head into the new year, and hopefully more on the coaching side, more on the dealing with stressors side, and a little bit more sharing my faith through these webinars as well. So you'll hear more biblically based webinars as well if you're interested in jumping on those. So Have a great weekend and have a great new year, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.